Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. This is Joan is Awful, and this is for advanced English speakers. Okay, so I'm going to use some more advanced English and explain where I do so. Okay, episode 1 of Black Mirror, season 6, acquaints us with Joan. We get to know Joan. We are introduced to Joan, acquaints us with Joan, who cohabitates, who lives with her partner Krish, and works at Sonical, a prominent technology company. Prominent just means important, noteworthy, etc. Regrettably, unfortunately, she finds herself compelled to deliver unfortunate news. Compelled to is just forced to, obligated to. So she finds herself compelled to deliver unfortunate news to one of her employees, Sandy, as she faces layoff. She's about to be fired, let go, sacked. If it's something negative, we normally say fired or sacked. When it's, if it's just economic, if it's an economic decision, perhaps, then at no fault of the employee, then we would say we let her go. She's going to be let go or made redundant. In the aftermath, so the aftermath are the consequences after something unpleasant has happened. Some sort of chaos or, after you've made a bad decision. The aftermath, Joan receives messages from her former partner, Mac. Former just means previous, who has returned to town. Following her work, after her work, Joan visits her therapist. Expressing her dissatisfaction, expressing is conveying with emotion, expressing her dissatisfaction with feeling like a robot. And lacking, so when we lack something, we don't have enough, there isn't sufficient. Lacking a sense of being the protagonist. Protagonist is the main character, the main actor, or one of the major actors in her own narrative, in her own story, her own life. So while enjoying drinks together, Matt urges Joan to abandon her job. Urges is just another word for encourages. Tries to persuade Joan to abandon. When you abandon something, you leave it for good. And we often use this to say suddenly, She abandoned her husband. He abandoned his wife. So he asked her to abandon her job and return to San Jose with him. Joan remains uncertain about the wisdom of this decision. Wisdom, to be wise, is to be knowledgeable, to be able to act knowledgeably, but impulsively kisses Matt in full view of others. To be impulsive is to act without forethought, without thinking. So Joan remains uncertain about the wisdom of this decision, but impulsively kisses Matt in full view of others. That night, Joan decides to watch a drama on Streamberry. Streamberry is Netflix, this series. Titled Joan is Awful, accompanied by Krish, along with Krish. This new series is based on Joan's life, encompassing various aspects, such as her reaction to Krish's cooking, the firing of Sandy, and everything in between. Now, everything in between literally means between 2 points. But we use it to say everything else. For instance, I could say, last night we discussed or we spoke about politics and religion and philosophy and everything in between. Everything else. Unable to trust Joan, Krish decides to leave that very night. So when we say that very night, it's just for emphasis. That same night, it's amusement. We just use it for emphasis. That very day, that very night. Joan finds that the townspeople are incredibly cold towards her. They're indifferent. They have no emotion towards her. It's like they ignore her. They show no love for her. Cold towards her. Eric talks with Joan in her office and delivers the grim news. She is being terminated. Terminated is just sacked, fired, let go. Now, grim, when we talk about grim, we talk about bad news. Somewhere is grim, it's gloomy, it's grey. So, we describe places like this. We say, oh, it's grim, or we say the future is grim, there's no hope. So you could say, for instance, that London was grim in the 18th century. The pollution was terrible. It was a very grim city. Joan had violated her NDA, her non-disclosure agreement. This is a confidentiality agreement. By discussing sensitive work matters with Sandy, prompting the board to dismiss her. So when you prompt someone, you encourage them. So this gave the board reason to dismiss her when she violated her non-disclosure agreement. To exacerbate matters, or to make matters worse, to make a situation even worse, is to exacerbate it. When Joan meets her lawyer, she discovers that Streambury has every right to exploit her life and transform it into a televised drama. When we transform something, we change it. We can transform conditions. You could say that lasers have transformed surgery. Transformation, to transform. All of this falls within the bounds of Streambury's terms and conditions. So it's reasonable, it's allowable up to a certain point. Within the bounds, appropriate degree or limit. So all of this falls within the bounds of Streambury's terms and conditions, which Joan accepted upon signing up. Consequently, there is nothing she can do. Because of this, there is nothing she can do. Not even pursue legal action, not even take legal action, not even go after. When you pursue something, you chase it. So she can't even go after legal action, she can't even take legal action against Salma Hayek, as she consented to the use of her digital likeness. When you consent to something, you agree, you give permission. She consented to the use of her digital likeness, consequently there's nothing she can do. That night, Joan seeks solace in Mac's company, seeks comfort, looks for comfort in Mac's company, and breaks down in tears. When you break down in tears, you have a sudden emotional outburst. You break down in tears, it's an emotional outburst. Losing control, Joan decides to indulge in junk food. When you indulge in something, you allow yourself the pleasure of something. And takes laxatives, attends a church wedding, and defecates on the floor, intending to besmirch or damage Salma Hayek's reputation. While Salma Hayek is displeased, she's not happy, her lawyer points out that Joan's actions, makes clear that Joan's actions fall within the contractual agreement. So they're within the terms and conditions, they're within a range. To fall within something is to be within a range. Believe it or not, Salma Hayek shows up at Joan's house. When we say believe it or not, this is like saying incredibly, surprising. Shows up is just another way of saying turns up, appears. Eager to discuss their shared grievances. Eager is very keen. They want to share these grievances, to talk about grievances. Grievances are complaints or reasons for complaints. concerning the drama. Believe it or not, Salma Hayek shows up at Joan's house, eager to discuss their shared grievances concerning the drama. Joan proposes a plan to dismantle the physical server responsible for the show. To propose something is to suggest it. And to dismantle is to take something apart. Joan proposes a plan to dismantle the physical server responsible for the show. Although Joan lacks the influence and power to gain access to the building, she won't get in, she won't be given access. Salma Hayek can undoubtedly reach Streambury HQ. Undoubtedly means definitely, without doubt. It's certain. Salma Hayek can reach Streambury HQ headquarters. When asked why they choose negative connotations like awful and terrible, Streambury replied casually that it generates better engagement. Connotation is an emotion or a feeling that is implied by a word. For instance, if you say somebody is feeling blue, she is feeling blue, blue is a color. But when we use this as a connotation, it means to describe a feeling of sadness. She's feeling blue. Connotations can be positive or negative or neutral. So, connotations. Salma and Joan venture into the office, where things become even stranger. So again, we're talking about connotations. The word venture means to go into somewhere, but there's an element of danger. It has a connotation of danger. Salma and Joan venture into the office. If they said they go into the office, there is no connotation there, but to venture into something, it denotes a feeling of danger. Right. It turns out that our Joan is not the genuine one. It turns out has a connotation of surprise. It turns out that Colombia has a lot of coffee. If that's a surprise, you would say it turns out that Colombia has a lot of coffee. It turns out that our Joan is not the genuine one. Our Joan is not the real Joan. Our Joan is merely a version of herself, portrayed by a digital likeness of Annie Murphy, the actress. Merely means just or only. She's just a version. She's only a version of herself, portrayed by a digital likeness. Merely, only, or just. Essentially, what we have witnessed is another level of fiction. Essentially is a word used to describe the main characteristics of a thing or a person. For instance, I could say Scotland is essentially cold during the winter months. It's essentially cold. It just means the main characteristics of something. It's for emphasis. Akin to looking into a series of cleverly arranged mirrors. Akin just means similar or like. So essentially, what we have witnessed is another level of fiction. Akin to looking into a series of cleverly arranged mirrors and observing multiple reflections. Essentially and akin. This implies that Joan is, in fact, a character in a TV show, and these coded versions of characters exist at different levels, depending on their depth within the system. When we imply something, we don't state it directly. Something is implied when it's said sort of indirectly. So, for instance, he implied that he was going to quit his job, but he didn't. He didn't say he was going to quit his job. He didn't say he was going to leave, but he certainly implied it. This is to imply. Armed with an axe, Joan contemplates completely destroying the quantum computer. To contemplate is to think about something for a period of time, usually deeply. Contemplation. The security personnel attempt to stop her. They try to stop her. But that does not deter Joan from carrying out her plan. It does not discourage her, it doesn't physically stop her from doing it, as it has already happened. Level 1 Joan has no control over this, and the real Joan destroys the computer, striving to regain control over her life. Striving is another way of saying making great efforts, really trying. And to regain is to take back control over her life. As the episode concludes, as the episode ends, we see that the real Joan remains under house arrest and surveillance. However, at least her entire life is no longer a spectacle. Her entire life is her whole life, and a spectacle is an event that draws attention. And she has found a new friend in Annie Murphy as well. As well just means también. 2. Like many other Black Mirror episodes, Joan is Awful is a cautionary tale of how far society and technology have gone and how far they can still go, as well as how desensitized society has become in recent years. That's the last of the 3 videos. I hope you enjoyed them. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.